Got Jason Ray here, longtime contributor here at the Voice of College Football, to break down the Oklahoma defense for us. Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman go in the third or fourth round of the NFL draft at picks 112 and 118. They're the big productive players that are missing. I know Davin Sears also found a home elsewhere. David Stone, there was fear that he was going to be gone. He was in the transfer portal, but he decided to stick around. So, Jason, as we set up the defense starting in the interior line, I guess that's a huge plus. And also that if you're an old school football guy that believes in the point of attack and the interior and the middle being the most important and where you start it all, Oklahoma's in great shape with guys like Dominic Williams and Grayson Halton.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I think when you coming into this season, looking at the Oklahoma defense, certainly the defensive line is going to be the strength of this team, right? As you'd mentioned, it was almost, I think, Mark, like a portal addition when David Stone, took his name out and decided to come back, and so, and I think that was I think a lot of people thought that was probably going to be what ended up happening, just in general, with him. I think it was interesting when that situation happened. I think it was a big blow to the coaching staff and a big blow to his teammates. I mean, I think there was a lot of just confusion and unhappiness. So Oklahoma being able to kind of work that out with him and get him back in is really big. But yeah, Mark, I mean, I think what Oklahoma brought back on the defensive line really allows that to be the strength of the team. Coming in a few years ago, understanding coming into the SEC, the defensive line was a point of contention that Oklahoma really needed to address, and they did that, right? They did that over the last few years, whether it be from the recruiting standpoint or the transfer portal. Ethan Downs will be a loss around that defensive line, but Oklahoma got potentially a guy that can replace him in Marvin Jones Jr. We'll see what that production looks like from him on the end. But yeah, you mentioned in the middle, Grayson Halton, David Stone, Dominique Williams, Jaden Jackson was really good as a true freshman last year. And then at the ends, we mentioned Marvin Jones Jr. probably is in line for a start. PJ Adebaware, who was a 5-star talent, really hasn't materialized, but you can see the body change in him over the last couple of years. And, I think spring was really good for him. And then R. Mason Thomas was really the leader from a sack perspective, 9 sacks a year ago. So yeah, I think that is going to be a really big strength of the team, considering that, maybe, I don't know that I would call it a weakness, but maybe secondary is probably the biggest question mark coming into the season. So I think defensively, when you start with that, and I think one of the things that's very interesting through kind of the off season is the changes in kind of the leadership on the defensive side of the ball. We know that Brent Venables, you talked about this, came out and said this in the spring. Yeah, I'm calling the plays on the defensive side of the ball. So not being the defensive coordinator and the head coach, I think obviously one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. I mean, I think that's obviously a welcome addition, and you like the fact that he's calling the plays, but on the flip side, what does that take away from the overall game management and kind of CEO? But aside from that, Oklahoma brought in a couple of coaches. Wes Godwin, defensive coordinator from Clemson, is coming over, coaching the inside linebackers. Nate Drayling coming over. He's going to be coaching the outside linebackers. So I think a couple of really, really solid additions from the coaching staff as well. That Mark coming into this season probably was a top 20, top 25 defense overall a year ago. Really championship level defense, and the offense. Obviously, we talked about that a few weeks ago, and it's been much maligned. Obviously, last year was not given the defense, putting them often in a position to be successful. So for that defense to still come away with being, overall top 20 was really solid. But there's some key holes that they have to fill this season coming into the fall.
The exact numbers for the Sooners on defense in 2024, number 19 in total defense, number 23 in yards per play given up. The pass efficiency defense, maybe not as good as most would think, at number 69. That was kind of the bugaboo. not giving up a total ton of yards there in regards to the passing game. But again, the pass efficiency numbers weren't great. And you mentioned the additions to the coaching staff at the linebacking position. Dason McCullough's a loss to Nebraska. He did miss 6 games. He didn't necessarily flash the way he was expected to when he came into the program. But how does the linebacking core shape up?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma likes where they're at from a starter's perspective. I mean, I think the depth is probably more the question mark, right? You know, Danny Stutzman was the leader of this defense, the leader of this team, really, just in production and just kind of overall on field and in locker room leadership. So I think his replacing his statistics is one thing, obviously, right? But I think it's replacing his leadership is another. However, kind of looking at the linebacking perspective coming into this season for Oklahoma, I think it's an interesting situation where there's really no debate on who the starters are going to be, right? You're going to have Kip Lewis, and then you're going to have Kobe McKenzie as your starting linebackers, pretty much no matter what, right? But I think the depth there, Owen Heineke is one guy who's going to kind of factor into that depth. Tyler Haim is another guy that's going to pull into that depth. And then the cheetah position is really an interesting, obviously, position. It's sort of kind of a quasi secondary / linebacker spot. You know, Kendall Dolby played that a bit last year until he got hurt, I believe in the Tennessee game, and was out for the remainder of the year. And Samuel Omasigo moved into that slot. Omasigo is a guy who's they feel like that he can move around a lot. He was really productive when he was out there last year. You'd mentioned Dason McCullough. That's Omasigo really kind of took his spot when he was out with injury the early part of the year. So I think and then another addition, you know, maybe the bigger addition was Kendall Daniels, obviously coming over from Oklahoma State to Oklahoma this year. And I think he is a guy that they've really got slotted in for that, for that cheetah position. So he's another guy that they can move around, make a lot of plays, really good in the secondary and in the open field as well. So I think the comfortability is there. I think maybe the concern would be on the depth on side. If a couple of kids get injured or something happens, you know, what does that look like? But I think it's will be very interesting to see what the makeup of that defense looks like without Stutzman patrolling the middle.
Breaking down the Oklahoma defense here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video and subscribe. Keep in mind that we've got an Oklahoma show with Chad and Tierney every Monday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. So check in on those two on Mondays, talking Oklahoma football. Jason Ray with us, of course, longtime contributor here at the Voice of College Football, covering softball for softballamerica.com and also the Big 12 tournament right now. So you can catch his work there if you just follow him on Twitter. Makari Vickers is a guy that has moved on to Colorado, never really did much at Oklahoma, but he was a big-time recruit as a top 100 player and a top 10 player at his position, never panned out. Kenai Walker is a guy that did play a lot of football. He stays in the SEC. He goes to Arkansas, a couple losses in the secondary. Peyton Bowen, of course, one of the best projected in the business. I don't know that he really had the kind of season from a playmaking standpoint that people projected him to have, but how does the secondary look?
Yeah, I think if you were to poll the kind of the level of concern throughout the levels of the defense, the secondary probably is number one on that list, and not necessarily, Mark, from a perspective of do they have what it takes to be one of the top 5-6 defenses from a secondary perspective in the SEC, but just from a perspective, they had a lot of injuries there last year, and they're banking on some of those kids coming back, being healthy. We talked about Kendall Dolby. He's a guy that's going to be part of that secondary. Had a really gruesome injury against Tennessee, coming back off of that, didn't participate in the spring. He'll be part of that defense, obviously, here in the fall when they get going with fall practice. And I think, we talked about Billy Bowman, again, very much like Danny Stutzman in the linebacker side of things, who who's been a mainstay on that defense for the last 3 or 4 years. So replacing a guy like him will be big. Gentry Williams was a guy that played really well a couple years ago, but just could not seem to stay healthy, and really was the same way this past year. Played maybe just a couple of games early on in the season and just wasn't right and couldn't stay healthy. Could be a big time cornerback, but his ability to stay healthy and be productive is big. He's a guy they're going to count on to start. Eli Bowen is another guy. Younger brother of Peyton Bowen was really a bit of a surprise in his true freshman season. I think obviously known a little bit more for that interception that he had against Alabama late in the season, but was really very consistent for Oklahoma. He's probably another guy that's right there at that other cornerback spot. Robert Spears Jennings Jr. is back, and he'll be part of that safety group. But yeah, I think the core is good. I think the concern is, can they stay healthy? Can they stay productive? As you mentioned, Oklahoma probably the weaker part of this side, and whether that's from a surprising perspective or just in general, just a passing efficiency defense was not what you would expect and what you would hope for out of a top 20, 25 defense. And so kind of shoring that up. And obviously the defensive line plays into that as well, right? Being able to get constant pressure on the quarterback, particularly getting pressure without blitzing a ton, it is going to be key just to help that secondary out a lot. So so I think just kind of remains to be seen what that's going to look like. But I think it's going to be the key for Oklahoma's defense in terms of how successful are they going to be able to be this year.
Jason, now that we've made our way through spring, a lot of outlets are putting out their post-spring top 25s, and Oklahoma seems to be right on that edge of the top 25 for a lot of people. And I think that comes from confidence in Brent Venables taking over the defense. And of course, the defense was strong last year. And then the additions to offense at quarterback and running back, and that things can't be anywhere close to as bad as that they were on offense. But probably what makes people, pundits in their projections, pull back a little bit is, again, a pretty daunting schedule.